Jeff, I'm going to say good afternoon. Is it good afternoon where you are?
It's actually good morning here, but good afternoon to you.
Well, good morning, happy new year, etc. When did you actually finish this film? Because you did such an in-depth investigation. I'm calling it a film, even though it's a three-part series. But when did you actually wrap on all of it?
Oh, it was such a protracted, prolonged process. I went through so many cycles. Um, but when it was all said and done, it was technically anyway. Just a few months back is when we really sort of locked it all down in a way that I was satisfied with. But that was after so many permutations, and we can get into that later if you want. Or
Sure. I mean, as a lifelong Doors fan as well, I think that this is, and you'll tell me if I'm way off the mark on this, but the kind of tent poles or landmarks in the Doors history, we know the hits because there's still, right now, there's at least five radio stations playing a Doors song right now. And then your next big thing in the timeline is the Oliver Stone movie, which anyone who knows any member of the Doors says there's so much fiction in this thing. And then even though Jim, whether or not you believe he passed, it was over 50 years ago, there's still a new record store day release every year. So they're still managing to find unreleased things. There's not a lot of between kind of stuff. Like people don't talk about the Doors album, Other Voices. Am I wrong about this so far?
no, no, not by a long shot. Yeah, I mean it's I've said it a million times. Jim is up there on the pantheon. He's on the I say it in the docu-mystery as I call it. He's on the Mount Rushmore of rock. He's up there with Elvis and the Beatles and Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin. Well, I guess there's on the Mount Rushmore of rock there would be way more personalities than in the real life Mount Rushmore, but you get the idea.
Sure. So there's kind of decades where we don't really know what the full story is, and you actually take all of that on. And as a licensed investigator, watching my first exposure to this project was the trailer, and I see there's either IRB or TLO skip traces used in there. When in this whole process did you realize, hey, we got to get a private investigator or two involved?
Well, the private investigator you see in the docu-mystery, it's a three-part docu-series, but I just lovingly call it a docu-mystery.
Right.
Someone told me I coined that phrase. I'm not sure if that's true, but I've been using it for about 15 years. So,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, the PI you see in the doc is named Cheryl Bombaugh. She was vital to the process, but there were other PIs that I worked with even before I met Cheryl, which was fairly early on in the process. But way back in the early days of production in 2012, 2013, I was reaching out to different private investigators. In fact, I love this, and it's absolutely true story. Long story somewhat short, there was a PI I found by just going through the online yellow pages. I found this guy in Hollywood, and I used to do an impression. He had this grizzled voice,
Sure.
like like old school, straight out of Central Casting. And he was hysterical. And he said, "I've been doing this longer than you've been alive."
That sounds like a normal PI, correct.
Yeah.
The
And I said, "Well,
yeah.
I'm calling to ask if you will help me find Jim Morrison." And there was this long silence, and then he just burst out laughing, and he knew who Jim was. And he said, "Look, I'm not going to keep doing the voice because I'm terrible at it, and it's bad for my throat." But
Sure.
he basically said, if Morrison is alive, or if he faked his death in 1971 and he doesn't want to be found, there's no way in hell you'll ever find him. He said back in 71, obviously there was no internet, there
Hmm.
was no paper trail, there were no smartphones. He said all you needed was the money to get a new, passport, new driver's license, new identity, and you're golden. And he said, I'll never forget that. He said, ironically, it's not much different today, and this was like 2013. He said basically it just comes down to the motive and the money.
Wow. And along the way, as a person who tapes a lot of interviews, I didn't realize that Elaine Boozler's husband was one of the people controlling the Doors legacy and all that. So it's very interesting to see how many people have been involved in keeping the Doors legacy alive for 50-ish years and all that. Are there a lot of them that you're on good terms with, or are you kind of persona non grata?
uh, that's a great question. I don't think I've ever been asked that one. I appreciate it.
Well, let me give you context as to why. I wrote a book about David Lee Roth, and David Lee Roth is one of these artists where they want the tall tales to live, and the tall tales are just totally false. So the second you start debunking them, people related to Van Halen and David Lee Roth want nothing to do with you. I'm wondering if you have a happier ending to all that.
Yeah, I got to say, I connected with over 1,000 people who were connected to Jim in those 12 years of production.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's everything from an email or a text to full-on formal interview,
Mm-hmm.
And of those 1,000 plus, I interviewed 130 on camera. It took a long time, and it took earning a lot of trust. And that's partly why it took so damn long, just that in and of itself. But I have to say, like, almost everyone was surprisingly really good natured, helpful, considerate, and kind. And I'll always be grateful for that. Of course, you get a couple of bad apples in every bunch, people with an agenda, people who have this fierce, proprietary grip on Jim. I had one guy who knew Jim literally scream in my face as I was treating him to dinner. He's dead. You need to let it go. And then I went, whoa. First of all, don't scream at me. We're in a restaurant. Second of all, you don't even know me.
Yeah.
Thirdly, I said, prove it. It's never been definitively proven. It's technically a cold case. And I've had a former judge, 2 attorneys, and a forensic expert, 4 different people tell me that the case regarding his alleged death would never stand up. It would never hold up in a court of law based on the evidence such as it is.
Was Jim Morrison, this is not a hyperbole thing, it just hit my mind. Was he the first can't prove that he is dead kind of thing? Because that obviously predates Elvis, that predates by decades Michael Jackson. I can't think of one before him.
There is one, and I'm sure there are others, of course, but one that I feel is close, near and dear to Jim himself, which is James Dean. Jim was a massive fan of James Dean, left a huge impression on him when he was around 12 years old, Rebel Without a Cause, and of course, Dean's death. And there were rumors even back then, apparently, from my research, that, Dean was actually survived the crash, but was paralyzed and was living in a convalescent home or, all kinds of stuff. I personally don't believe that. But yeah, in terms of, I think that set a precedent for Jim. I think he saw Dean's death, as many have, as, like, ironically, the ultimate career move. So
Andy Kaufman was a later one of those as well, where you still have the people trying to say, is this a hoax or not? Now, are you a big conspiracy theory person besides Jim Morrison, or is this just the one reserved topic?
There's a great meme that's been floating around for the better part of 20 years online that says conspiracy theorist, nothing more than a derogatory title used to dismiss a critical thinker. And that's what I'm old school. I'm 57 years old. I'm a critical thinker, back from a time when you could do that without immediately being have haters and trolls slap a tinfoil hat on you, or whatever.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, my friends have teased me good naturedly, you think everyone faked their death. And I always say, no, just 2, Jim Morrison and Andy Kaufman. And I think Kaufman did it because it was the last trick in his bag of tricks. He said himself he had done it all as a performance artist and comedian. So I think outside of faking his death, that was his last trick to pull. Whereas Jim, it was quite different. With Jim, I think it was, just to escape a life that he had long outgrown and I'm overwhelmed by. So
with the Kaufman one, I go back and forth on that one, because didn't he die of lung cancer, but was a non-smoker?
Yes. And that's not to say that doesn't sometimes occur, you know. In fact, it's interesting when in July of 2012, when I broke ground on Before the End,
Hmm.
searching for Jim Morrison, my docu-mystery, I had gone back and forth for a couple of months. I was like, okay, I'm ready to do a doc and really do it. Like my first real doc with
Right.
production values and like the whole 9 yards. I'd only ever done one other one, a tiny UFO doc that was like just this little labor of love that was meant to just be on YouTube and never professionally released. But a production company approached me and wanted to release it. Um, so with this, I was like, okay, I could do Andy Kaufman, I could do Marilyn Monroe, I could do Jim Morrison. You know, these three figures that were dear to me. And
Yeah.
then I thought, okay, I know Jim the best, so I got to go with Morrison, and that's what led me to take on this project.
You actually led me to another thing which I was going to ask is usually when you have an ambitious project and you finish it and there's great press around it and there's great hype around it, people start to go, what's next? And there's two schools of thoughts. I'm going to do the same exact thing a little bit differently, or this was such a painstaking process. I will never do this again. So is the next Jeff Finn project one of those figures, another mystery thing? Or do you go, actually, I want to do a rom-com?
Oh, that's a great question, man. Yeah, I've got a number of ideas in the hopper regarding my next docu-mystery. You know, this time I would need the funding up front because I did everything reverse with this. I did it piecemeal,
Right.
which is an it took so damn long, you know. But I've also written a book, which is a companion piece, a tie-in to Before the End, which is called 127 Fascination, Jim Morrison Decoded. I've spent the last half decade on that alone. I've also written a novel about Paul McCartney and the Paul is Dead phenomenon in 1969, and it's called The House of Paul. That's finished. Making forays regarding a independent publisher for both of those books, actually. So, and we'll see whatever else shakes out. But in the interim, I would just like a 2 week vacation. That's my goal.
Are
For
are you going to get that 2 week vacation once you're done with all this press?
I mean, I'm grateful for all of it, but yeah, I'm the first one to admit I'm just a bit fatigued after, you know, October marked 39 years of my DIY research into Jim and 12 years of
Hmm.
you know, working on the project. It's been a lot, and I'm grateful for all of it. But yeah, it'd be fun to just chill a little bit.
I'd have to imagine there's a lot of good cutting room floor stuff from the three-parter.
Oh, I always joke, how much time do you have? I shot so much footage, so many interviews. I've joked that it makes Ken Burns look like a master of brevity. It's epic, and if I if I wanted to, or I could, like, I mean, this thing could be literally like a 24-parter. It could be, as I've riffed on Andy Warhol's, you know, 24-hour movie. It could be a 24-hour docu-mystery. So I'm hoping there's talk of possibly doing a limited edition DVD box set that would be the, you know, the director's cut, where I could get it all out there. And I would love to do that. So we'll see. We'll see.
Wow. Okay, that is exciting. When there's demand, that stuff gets done. So, two quick questions for you, and then I let you go. You ready?
Yes.
Okay, first one. Obviously, you're a very passionate person that when you're interested in something, you will commit all the time that's needed and actually finish it. A lot of people commit the time, don't finish the thing, they get frustrated. What is your number two passion away from finding truth and music and all that kind of stuff in the form of filmmaking?
Oh, well, I was going to say my number two passion. Well, actually, my top passion, ironically, is writing. I mean, first and foremost, I've always been a writer, but the research goes hand in hand with that, you know.
Hmm.
So yeah. But as far, no, I'm sorry, you're asking me about film. What's my other passion regarding film itself in general?
Sort of. I think that whenever you find what somebody does for a living or their high profile kind of thing, at first we think it, oh, that's fun. You get paid to do that. You get paid to talk about that. People want to talk to you about that. But then you find out that their main hobby is the exact opposite of that. So case in point, Alice Cooper, a born again Christian who never misses church, who's sober, every free moment that he's not with his family, it seems like he's golfing. And I couldn't think of two more diametrically opposed things from hard rock and golf, basically. And you find out that that's a very common thing. A lot of punk people into golf, etc. And then you see a lot of heavy metal artists that are super into yoga and meditation. Again, the exact opposite of metal. So in your case, do you have that exact opposite passion or hobby?
I mean, if I'm being honest, I've been so damn busy with this for so long. It's been so consuming and overwhelming. I haven't really had much time. I mean, I joke that I can really, it's hard to just get a few hours away to read a book
Sure.
myself. Huge reader, you know. But yeah, I guess when I can, I love to hop on my bike and just ride ride some trails, you know, where I won't get hit by a car, and and just ride and sort of clear the decks of my brain that way. But I should point out too, you mentioned being paid. It's been 12 and a half years of this project, and I have yet to make a penny on it. So it was a true labor of love. I mean, it's a true independent venture. I wasn't funded by anybody, including the Doors, first and foremost. That
Right.
this is an independent, unauthorized project. You know, because I want the real truth as opposed to the truth. I want the granular, real truth.
Well said. So we'll eventually find that Jim Irsay benefactor person who eventually quietly buys your archive out. But before we get there, last question. As a big music person and big entertainment person, what's the last concert that you went to?
Oh, uh, I don't even know if I can recall that. I mean, again, this thing has consumed my just about my every waking moment for over 12 years now, full time. And obviously, there was financing and funding along the way, but it
Sure.
was all independently based. And thanks to a Kickstarter, successful Kickstarter campaign very early on. Man, wait, I almost had it there.
It wasn't the Robbie Krieger band.
Yeah. With all due respect, I want to say it's been that long, man. I want to say it was My Bloody Valentine, or God,
Wow.
I'm a huge My Bloody Valentine fan.
For
I
sure.
saw the house a few years ago. My Bloody Valentine Ministry, the church. It's been about 5 years since I've been to a show, but I want to say it was My Bloody Valentine.
If so, amazing concert that must have been. But Jeff, thank you for making this series. Really looking forward to what's next. And it's the people like you who honestly keep music alive by getting us talking about figures who otherwise people may have abandoned. So thank you for being you, a really original person.
Oh man, thank you, Darren. It's a pleasure to meet you, and yeah, I just hope people will take this as an opportunity to get a deeper understanding of Jim the person. I mean, obviously, we all know the rock star, the rock god, even. This is about Jim Morrison, the person versus the persona. You know, of course, the Doors were a huge part of his trajectory, but he lived 21 years before he formed the band. He was an adult, and so I also drilled down deep into those formative years, those first 21 years, in terms of what shaped him and who shaped him and led him to become the Jim Morrison we think we know.
Paltrocast.